Surviving raids in Tarkov can sometimes be extremely frustrating, especially if you're dying raid after raid, but in this video I'm going to show you 4 tips on how to survive more of your raids. Stick around and let's get into it. So starting with tip number 1, don't play excessively passive. Now when I say this, I don't mean that you need to become Landmark 2.0 by any means. I just mean holding bad angles less often and moving around more often. To illustrate what I mean, in this clip here, I heard a guy running nearby me. I held an angle and ended up dying. Now, if I had strafed out into his path and caught him off guard while he was running, I likely wouldn't have died to him. Unfortunately, with the way that desync works in Tarkov, holding angles tends to not be the best choice. Even though I had just barely even seen this guy when he started shooting me, he had likely had much more time to react than I did. So to briefly summarize, make an effort to catch players off guard while they're either pushing you or simply just running near you, rather than holding an angle. On top of that, do your best to play as aggressively as you're comfortable with. But that also leads us to point number 2. Don't be afraid to abandon fights. Not being afraid to abandon unfavorable fights was a skill that I learned that immediately boosted my survival rate by about 20 to 30%. In a game based around both looting and shooting, knowing when to disengage from fights, or simply just avoid fights altogether, is incredibly valuable. Now, that being said, it obviously isn't always possible for you to run from a fight or avoid fighting, like if you were to get stuck inside of a room or a building. However, when it is possible, that is always something that you should really be considering in the back of your mind. If you get caught off guard by a group of players when running a corner, or get shot from miles away from someone you have no chance of fighting back with, it's not cowardly to retreat, even if you don't plan on re-engaging those enemies. Like I said earlier, when I first started implementing this tip into my raids, I found that by avoiding at least some fights, I'd be surviving way more frequently, and didn't die to frustrating events nearly as often. So if you don't already do this, at least give it a try and see if it helps in your raids. Alright, so tips 3 and 4 are kinda similar, but I'm gonna break them down separately, starting with number 3. Investing in better gear. Now, I don't mean that you need to bring in level 6 armor and a completely tricked out gun. I just mean that you should invest in slightly more effective equipment. A great example of this is with your gun and ammo. Rather than constantly running in insanely cheap 20k SKS and nothing else, which I have covered in this video in the top right corner, and is still a fine kit to run by the way, considering using a more modded SKS build with a scope and a few initial rounds of BP ammo might net you way more success than you think. For this example of the SKS, rather than being limited by both range and penetration capability, you would then have the ability to engage enemies at range, as well as pen the majority of the armors in game. A big step up in my opinion. And well, yes, you will be paying an additional 70 to 100k to do so. You'll also give yourself an insane boost to your survivability in raids, and will probably notice a difference immediately while combining this tip with the previous ones. I like to think of my gear as an investment rather than just something to sink money into, and I found that that helped me ignore the money that I was spending a lot more. And now, sticking on the same topic, tip number 4 is investing in better meds. This one basically follows the same principles. So if you don't already use items such as morphines, hemostats, and other higher tier meds, you're sort of losing out on some really useful benefits. If we compare something such as a morphine with the 4-use painkillers, which shall not be named, 4-use analgin painkillers, I don't know how to say those. A morphine takes 2 seconds to use, removes 15 hydration, and gives a painkiller effect for about 5 minutes. The 4-use painkiller on the other hand takes 3 seconds to use, removes 19 hydration per use, and only lasts for 1 minute and 35 seconds. So even though the morphine costs a good bit more, it lasts far longer, has a shorter use time, and much less dehydration. In general, all the meds I'd recommend upgrading to, which I will mention in a second, follow the same trend of having shorter use times and just generally better benefits than their less effective counterparts. Overall, I'd really suggest replacing any of your painkillers with either a morphine or a propofol, replacing any heavy bleed stoppers with a hemostat or a Zagustin if you want to be extra fancy, and if you don't already, add a 2-use bandage to your kit, since it'll keep you from having to use a bunch of your medkit's durability on light bleeds. In my opinion, really any medkit is fine, so you can just keep using whichever one you like. And that's pretty much it. Now that you've learned tips on surviving more raids, why not check out this video on how to make 2 times more money in your raids? Or how about this one about budget guns? I appreciate you a bunch for watching until the end. If you enjoyed, it'd also mean a ton if you subscribed. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.